Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. Friedrich Nietzsche told you love would save you, that it would be pure, redemptive, unconditional, that the right woman would heal the cracks you've never dared to face alone. From childhood, from stories, from songs, they whispered a promise into your subconscious. One day, someone will come and make everything okay. And you believed it, not because you're weak, not because you're naive, but because you were never given the tools to see through the illusion. What if that promise was never meant to be kept? What if the love you've been searching for is not salvation, but strategy? And what if Nietzsche, the philosopher you've been told to fear or misunderstand, saw it all coming? Nietzsche didn't write fairy tales. He wrote like a scalpel, cutting through masks, through myths, through the emotional comfort zones we build around our egos. And when he looked at love, at women, at the way we relate to each other, what he saw wasn't pretty. It wasn't polite, but it was real. And most of us, especially men, still aren't ready to hear it. Because here's the truth that will shatter everything you thought you knew about love. You don't love her. You love the version of her that reflects who you wish you were. You love the way she validates you, the way her presence says you are enough. But validation is not love. And what you call love might just be a carefully curated illusion that keeps you emotionally obedient. You feel that sting, that resistance rising in your chest. Good. That's your ego fighting for its life. Because what I'm about to tell you will destroy the comfortable lies you've been living. Women, Nietzsche understood, had to master power in a world that denied them visibility. They weren't given swords, so they learned to fight with silence. They weren't offered control, so they mastered influence. Not because they are inherently manipulative, but because they were forced to operate from the shadows while men claim the light. And that's where the modern man still fails to see clearly. You mistake strategy for softness. You confuse adaptability with innocence. You think she's fragile. You think her love is unconditional. You think her tenderness is purity. It's not. It's power refined, rehearsed, and executed with precision that would make Machiavelli weep with envy. While you spill your emotions and call it vulnerability, she is scanning your words for leverage. While you dream of soulmates, she is calculating the cost of closeness, weighing need against control, desire against influence. Not maliciously, instinctively, because she learned a long time ago that the one who sees the game but doesn't speak of it wins. And what about you? You were raised to idealize, to put her on a pedestal so high that it excuses your blindness. You don't see the strategy because you don't want to. You prefer the dream, the muse, the good girl, the healer. But what if those roles are masks? Masks she's learned to wear because they work. Nietzsche exposed the lie not to destroy women, but to destroy the stories men tell themselves about women. Because as long as you believe she is morally superior by nature, as long as you believe her affection is without motive, you will continue to surrender your agency in exchange for emotional security. And she will accept that power not because she hates you, but because the system taught her to use it. Listen carefully to what I'm about to say, because this might be the most important thing you ever hear. You are not being loved, you are being handled. And the scariest part is you like it that way. You like the comfort, you like the worship, you like the emotional anesthesia that lets you avoid yourself. Because the moment you stop needing her to be your redemption, you'll have to face what's behind your need. And that, not heartbreak, is what truly terrifies you. Fear wears many disguises, and one of its favorites is romantic devotion. You think you're loving her purely, you think you're giving yourself freely, but look deeper. What you're offering is not love, it's bargaining. You're saying, if I give you my heart, will you fix the parts of me I don't want to face? You're not seeking a partner, you're seeking a solution. And while you offer your soul in search of comfort, she's listening. Not to your words, but to your needs. Not because she's cruel, but because every vulnerability you reveal becomes a map of your emotional pressure points. And she learns them quickly, not to hurt you, but to position herself in your psyche where she becomes indispensable. This is where most men's understanding breaks down completely. You think she's reacting to you spontaneously, authentically, from pure emotion. But watch more carefully. Notice how she remembers everything, not just your words, but your tone, your body language, the things that make you light up and the things that make you withdraw. She's creating a psychological profile without ever telling you that's what she's doing. When you're excited about something, she matches your energy, not because she's genuinely excited, but because she's learned that mirroring creates connection. When you're down, she offers just enough comfort to keep you dependent, but not so much that you feel completely secure. Security, after all, breeds complacency, and a complacent man is a man who might start looking elsewhere. This isn't conscious manipulation. It's far more sophisticated than that. It's evolutionary programming that has been refined over thousands of years. Women who couldn't influence men died out. Women who couldn't read emotional cues didn't survive. What you're seeing in her behavior isn't personal. It's the result of natural selection favoring women who could navigate male psychology with surgical precision. Nietzsche saw this. He saw that what we call love is often just a subtle contest for emotional real estate. Who controls the rhythm of closeness? Who withholds first? Who gives in last? These are not questions of affection. They're questions of power. And here's the uncomfortable truth that will make your stomach turn. The one who needs less controls more. You give her everything. Time, attention, identity. You call that honesty. She gives you what you crave, just enough to keep you chasing. She calls that connection. But it isn't connection. It's choreography. A dance where you think you're leading, but she's been choosing the music all along. We've built a culture where women are taught to influence without appearing to lead, and men are taught to submit while thinking they're conquering. It's not her fault. It's not your fault. It's the result of centuries of conditioning where men dominated the outer world and women mastered the inner one. And now, in modern love, you walk right into the trap, smiling. She doesn't need to argue, she needs to suggest. She doesn't need to demand, she needs to desire. And in doing so, she shapes you, your decisions, your identity without ever raising her voice. That's not manipulation. That's mastery. You call her mysterious because you don't understand her. You don't understand her because you've never questioned your own myths. You still think love is about unity. She knows love is about leverage, and when she pulls away, it haunts you, not because she's gone, but because your reflection left with her. Nietzsche would say, you never loved her. You loved the way she made you feel about yourself. She was the stage where you performed your worth. Now the stage is gone, and you're left with silence and the truth. And here it is, brutal and unavoidable. She didn't deceive you. She simply stopped playing the role you wrote for her. You didn't see her. You saw your idea of her. And when she stopped performing it, you called her cold. You called her cruel. But maybe the real betrayal was yours for loving a fantasy and expecting her to live inside it. This is why your relationships follow the same pattern over and over again. You meet someone new and immediately begin the process of projection. You see potential where there's reality. You see salvation where there's simply another human being with her own agenda, her own fears, her own survival strategies. The early days feel magical because you're both performing. She's presenting her best self. The self that she's learned gets the response she wants from men. And you're presenting your best self, the self you think she wants to see. Neither of you is lying exactly, but neither of you is being completely authentic either. But here's where it gets interesting and where Nietzsche's insights become truly devastating. You think you're both equally invested in this performance. You're not. She knows it's a performance. You believe it's authentic connection. She's aware she's playing a role. You think you've found your soulmate. This gives her an enormous advantage. While you're lost in the fantasy, she's managing the reality. While you're surrendering to emotion, she's calculating outcomes. While you're falling in love with your projection of her, she's deciding whether you're worth the investment of her time and energy. And how does she make that calculation? By watching how you respond to her various presentations of self. Does he get jealous when I mention other men? That shows he's invested. Does he rearrange his schedule for me? That shows I have influence. Does he seek my approval before making decisions? That shows he's becoming dependent. Each of these data points helps her determine her level of power in the relationship. And the more power she has, the less effort she needs to expend to maintain control. This isn't conscious scheming. It's intuitive navigation of social dynamics that women have been perfecting for millennia. Nietzsche didn't condemn women. He condemned men who refused to grow up, who wanted muses instead of mirrors, who begged for angels instead of daring to face human beings in all their glorious, terrifying complexity. If you're ready to stop blaming her, then you're ready to look at yourself. Not with guilt, not with shame, but with clarity. And from clarity, something radical can begin. Not the end of love, but its transformation. You were taught that love is the highest virtue, that to love selflessly is the mark of a good man. But what if that selflessness is just another mask for emotional dependency? What if, beneath the poetic gestures and grand declarations, there's a quiet fear whispering, "If I don't give everything, she won't stay." And so you offer more, you compromise more, you erase parts of yourself to become what you think she wants, not because you love her, but because you fear being without her. This isn't nobility, it's submission disguised as romance. And while you think you're being brave, she feels something else entirely: control. Not through force, but through presence, through your willingness to orbit around her approval. Because here's the truth Nietzsche hinted at that so few are willing to hear. Love, when rooted in need, is never equal. She may not ask you to change, but you change anyway. She may not demand your obedience, but you give it anyway. Why? Because you've convinced yourself that her acceptance is your salvation. But she didn't ask to be your savior, she was just being herself. And you turned that into a mirror of your worth. And when that mirror cracks, you don't just feel loss. You feel collapse, because it wasn't love you were protecting. It was the story. The story that says, if she loves me, I am whole. If she stays, I matter. But stories aren't truth. And when reality intrudes, you call it betrayal. Nietzsche would call it awakening. The lie is not that she has power. The lie is that you didn't see it. You called her gentle, but she was observant. You called her nurturing, but she was strategic. You thought she surrendered, but she was choosing, always choosing, because she understood something you never did. The one who sees the dynamic clearly holds the key. And now, finally, the illusion begins to crack. You remember moments when she smiled, but something behind the smile was calculating. You remember how your smallest emotional shifts were answered before you even voiced them. You thought she was intuitive, and she was. But intuition, for her, is survival. It's her way of staying a step ahead in a world that never gave her the power to confront, only the power to shape. This isn't about blame. This is about reality. You live in a world where love is sold as mutual surrender but practiced as mutual leverage, where vulnerability is branded as a virtue but used as currency. And the moment you realize this, you either grow up or you break down. Most choose to break. They go back to the myth. They look for another muse, another emotional performance partner. They say this time will be different, but it won't, because the roles haven't changed. Only the actors have. And until you stop needing her to play the part, you'll never meet the person behind the mask. But what happens when the mask comes off? When you stop seeking roles and start seeing reality, you begin to notice what was always there. Not manipulation, not malice, but instinct. A woman aware of her lack of institutional power, mastering relational power instead. Not because she wants to control you, but because this is the only power she's been allowed to have. So ask yourself this question that will either liberate you or destroy everything you thought you knew about yourself. Are you ready to see her without the myth? Because only then can you see yourself. And only then does love stop being a story and become a revolution. But let's go deeper. Let's examine the mechanics of how this dynamic plays out in your daily life, because understanding the pattern is the first step toward breaking free from it. Watch how she responds to your emotions. When you're upset, does she immediately try to fix it, or does she first gauge how your upset affects her position? When you're happy, does she celebrate with you, or does she subtly redirect the conversation back to herself? Pay attention to timing. Notice how she chooses when to be available and when to be distant. It's never random. There's always a calculation behind it. When you're feeling confident and independent, she becomes more attentive. When you're needy and desperate, she becomes less available. This isn't cruelty, it's strategy. She's learned that attention given to a man who feels secure creates attachment. Attention given to a man who feels insecure creates desperation. And desperate men are predictable men. Predictable men are controllable men. She doesn't want to control you because she enjoys power for its own sake. She wants to control you because unpredictable men are dangerous to her emotional and physical security. Think about the last time you had a disagreement. How did it end? Did you resolve it through mutual understanding and compromise? Or did it end when you capitulated to avoid losing her? Most men choose capitulation and call it love. They'd rather be wrong together than right alone. But here's what Nietzsche understood that most men never will. Your willingness to be wrong to keep her is exactly what makes her lose respect for you. Women are not attracted to men who surrender their truth for comfort. They're attracted to men who hold their ground even when it's difficult. Yet you've been conditioned to believe the opposite. You've been told that compromise is mature, that flexibility is strength, that putting her needs before your own is love. But watch her behavior, not her words. Does she compromise as much as you do? Does she put your needs before her own as consistently as you put hers first? The answer, if you're honest, is no. And that's not because she's selfish. It's because she understands something you don't. In any relationship, someone is the sun and someone is the planet. The sun doesn't orbit the planet. The planet orbits the sun, and she's determined not to be the planet. This solar system analogy isn't meant to be degrading to either party. It's simply recognizing the natural hierarchy that emerges in most relationships. Someone leads, someone follows. Someone sets the rhythm, someone dances to it. Someone determines the emotional temperature, someone adjusts to it. Nietzsche observed that modern men have been trained to be planets, believing that orbiting around feminine energy is noble and romantic. But planets don't choose their orbit. They're trapped by gravitational forces beyond their control. And that's exactly what your neediness becomes, a gravitational force that traps you in patterns you never consciously chose. She doesn't have to manipulate you when your own neediness does the work for her. She doesn't have to control you when your fear of loss makes you control yourself. She doesn't have to diminish you when your own insecurity makes you shrink in her presence. This is the brilliance of feminine strategy. It works with masculine psychology rather than against it. She doesn't have to overpower you. She just has to become the thing you're afraid to lose. And once she achieves that position, your own psychology does the rest. You start monitoring her moods more than your own. You start planning your day around her availability. You start measuring your worth by her response to you. You become emotionally dependent while telling yourself you're in love. But what if you understood this dynamic clearly enough to break free from it? What if, instead of being an unconscious participant in this dance, you became a conscious observer of it? What if you could see the strings without being moved by them? This is where Nietzsche's philosophy becomes truly revolutionary. He didn't just identify the problem, he pointed toward the solution. The solution isn't to hate women for having power. The solution is to stop giving them power over your emotional state. But how do you do that when every instinct you have screams that you need her validation to feel worthwhile? How do you break a pattern that's been reinforced from childhood, that's been celebrated in every love song and romantic movie you've ever consumed? You start by recognizing that your need for her validation is not love, it's addiction. And like any addiction, it requires progressively larger doses to achieve the same high. First, it's enough that she likes you. Then you need her to love you. Then you need her to choose you over other options. Then you need her to prove her love through increasing sacrifice and commitment. But no amount of external validation will ever fill the internal void you're trying to escape. No woman's love will ever convince you that you're worthy if you don't believe it yourself. No relationship will ever make you whole if you enter it as a fragment seeking completion. This is the cruel irony that Nietzsche understood. The very thing you think you need to be happy, her unconditional love and acceptance, is the thing that will ultimately destroy your happiness. Because unconditional love from someone you're obsessed with isn't love at all. It's enablement of your emotional immaturity. Real love requires two people who don't need each other to feel complete. Real love emerges between people who choose each other from a place of strength, not weakness. Real love is the meeting of two suns, not a sun and a planet. But becoming a sun requires something most men are terrified to do. You have to be willing to burn alone. You have to be willing to generate your own light, your own warmth, your own gravitational field. You have to be willing to exist without her validation, without her presence, without her approval. And this terrifies you because it means facing the possibility that you might not be as lovable as you hoped. It means confronting the parts of yourself you've been using her presence to avoid. It means doing the difficult work of building a life that's fulfilling whether she's in it or not. Most men will never do this work. They'll continue the cycle, relationship after relationship, wondering why the same patterns keep emerging. They'll blame women for being manipulative instead of examining why they're so easy to manipulate. They'll seek relationship advice that teaches them better ways to please women instead of learning how to stop needing to please anyone. But you're different. If you've made it this far, if these words are cutting through your defenses and touching something real inside you, then you're ready for the most difficult truth of all. Your romantic problems aren't about finding the right woman. They're about becoming the right man. And the right man, according to Nietzsche, isn't the one who sacrifices himself for love. He's the one who loves himself enough to refuse to sacrifice his authenticity for anyone else's comfort. He's the one who understands that true attraction isn't born from neediness, but from strength. He's the one who can stand alone without desperation, and therefore can stand with someone else without dependency. This transformation isn't gentle. It's not a gradual evolution where you slowly become more confident while maintaining all your current patterns. It's a complete destruction of who you've been in relationships, followed by a conscious reconstruction of who you choose to become. You have to be willing to lose every relationship you've ever had if those relationships were built on your willingness to be less than who you are. You have to be willing to disappoint women who expected you to play roles that diminish your authenticity. You have to be willing to be alone until you meet someone who can handle your fullness. And here's the paradox that Nietzsche understood. The moment you become willing to be alone is the moment you become truly attractive to the kind of woman worth being with. Not the woman who needs you to be small so she can feel big. Not the woman who requires your weakness to feel powerful, but the woman who can match your strength and complement your wholeness. But such women are rare. Most women, like most people, are unconscious. They're operating from patterns they've never examined, playing roles they've never questioned. They're not malicious, but they're not awake either. And an unconscious woman will always try to reduce a conscious man back to unconsciousness, because conscious men are unpredictable, and unpredictable men require more effort to influence. This is why your journey toward authenticity will be lonely. Friends who are invested in keeping you small will distance themselves from you. Women who were attracted to your neediness will lose interest when you become self-sufficient. Family members who benefited from your people-pleasing will guilt you for becoming more selective with your energy. But this loneliness is necessary. It's the price of authenticity. It's the cost of freedom. And Nietzsche would tell you that it's worth paying, because the alternative, a life lived in service to others' expectations, isn't really living at all. So how do you begin this transformation? How do you break patterns that have defined your entire approach to relationships? How do you become the kind of man who can see through feminine strategy without becoming bitter or resentful? First, you stop making women responsible for your emotional state. When she's distant, you don't chase. When she's moody, you don't try to fix it. When she's testing you, you don't fail the test by becoming reactive. You maintain your center regardless of what's happening in her world. Second, you develop a life that's fulfilling whether she's in it or not. You pursue goals that matter to you, not goals that you think will impress her. You build friendships that nourish you, not just relationships that serve your romantic strategy. You create meaning that comes from within, not validation that depends on external approval. Third, you practice saying no. No to requests that compromise your values. No to demands that require you to be someone you're not. No to relationships that drain your energy without offering genuine reciprocity. Most men are terrified to say no to women because they've been taught that masculine accommodation is attractive. It's not. It's repulsive. Fourth, you learn to recognize and interrupt your own neediness before it drives your behavior. When you feel the urge to text her when she hasn't responded, you don't text. When you want to rearrange your plans to accommodate hers, you pause and ask yourself why. When you catch yourself seeking her approval, you stop and give yourself the approval you're seeking. This isn't about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about becoming grounded. Cold men are reactive. They're protecting themselves from hurt by shutting down. Grounded men are responsive. They engage with others from a place of strength rather than need. The difference is crucial. A cold man avoids intimacy because he's afraid of being hurt. A grounded man welcomes intimacy because he's not afraid of being himself. A cold man withholds affection as a defense mechanism. A grounded man gives affection freely because his emotional well-being doesn't depend on how it's received. When you become truly grounded, something magical happens in your relationships. Women stop trying to control you because they sense that you can't be controlled. They stop testing you because they realize you're not going to fail their tests by becoming reactive. They stop playing games because they understand that you're not going to play along. And paradoxically, this is when many women become most attracted to you. Not because you're treating them badly, but because you're treating yourself well. Not because you're being cruel, but because you're being authentic. Not because you don't care about them, but because you don't need them to feel complete. This level of groundedness is what Nietzsche called self-overcoming, the process of transcending your conditioned responses and choosing your actions from a place of conscious, will rather than unconscious need. It's the difference between being driven by your psychology and being the driver of your psychology. But let's be brutally honest about what this transformation requires. It requires you to face every insecurity you've been using relationships to avoid. It requires you to confront every childhood wound you've been expecting women to heal. It requires you to acknowledge every way you've betrayed yourself in pursuit of love. This process is not for the weak. It's not for men who want easy answers or comfortable solutions. It's for men who are willing to sacrifice everything they think they know about love in order to discover what love actually is when it's not contaminated by neediness, projection, and unconscious manipulation. Most men will read these words and nod along, thinking they understand, but then go right back to their old patterns the moment they meet someone new. They'll convince themselves that this woman is different, that this time will be different, that they've learned enough to avoid the old traps. But you can't avoid the traps by learning about them intellectually. You can only avoid them by becoming the kind of person who doesn't fall into them. And that requires a fundamental shift in your identity, not just your strategy. You have to stop being a man who needs women and become a man who enjoys them. You have to stop being a man who seeks completion and become a man who offers it. You have to stop being a man who performs for approval and become a man who gives approval to himself. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's a daily practice of choosing authenticity over accommodation, truth over comfort, self-respect over external validation. It's a commitment to becoming whole regardless of whether anyone else appreciates your wholeness. And here's the most challenging part. You have to be willing to lose everyone who can't handle the real you. You have to be willing to disappoint people who have become accustomed to your people-pleasing. You have to be willing to be misunderstood by people who prefer the version of you that served their needs. Nietzsche called this the loneliness of the authentic man. It's the price you pay for refusing to live according to others' expectations. It's the cost of choosing your own values over socially approved ones. It's the sacrifice required to become truly free. But on the other side of this loneliness is something most men never experience: genuine intimacy. Not the pseudo-intimacy of codependency, where two incomplete people cling to each other for emotional survival, but the real intimacy that's possible between two whole people who choose each other freely, who see each other clearly, who love each other authentically. This kind of love doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen to people who are unconscious. It doesn't happen to men who are still looking for someone to complete them. It only happens to people who have done the work of becoming complete within themselves. And when it does happen, it's nothing like the desperate clinging you've been calling love. It's spacious rather than suffocating. It's challenging rather than comfortable. It's growth-oriented rather than security-seeking. It's based on who you are rather than who you pretend to be. The woman who can love you at this level isn't the woman who needs you to be weak so she can feel strong. She's the woman who can handle your strength and match it with her own. She's not looking for a project to fix or a role to fill. She's looking for an equal to dance with. But before you can attract this kind of woman, you have to become this kind of man. And that transformation begins with a simple but terrifying decision. You have to choose yourself, not selfishly, but authentically, not at the expense of others, but in service of your truth. You have to stop asking, "What does she want from me?" and start asking, "What do I want from myself?" You have to stop trying to be the man you think she'll love and start being the man you can respect. You have to stop seeking her approval and start giving yourself the approval you've been seeking from her. This is the revolution that Nietzsche was pointing toward. Not a revolution against women, but a revolution against the unconscious patterns that keep both men and women trapped in cycles of manipulation and dependency. A revolution toward consciousness, authenticity, and genuine freedom. The question is, are you ready for this revolution? Are you willing to sacrifice the comfortable lies for the uncomfortable truth? Are you prepared to lose everything you think you know about love in order to discover what love actually is? If the answer is yes, then your real journey is just beginning. If the answer is no, then you'll continue the cycle, wondering why the same patterns keep repeating, why the same problems keep emerging, why love continues to feel like a battlefield instead of a sanctuary. The choice is yours, but choose consciously. Choose with full awareness of what you're accepting and what you're rejecting, because unconscious choices aren't really choices at all, they're just reactions disguised as decisions. Nietzsche's message isn't comfortable, but it's liberating. It strips away the illusions that keep you trapped and points toward a way of being that most men never discover. It's not easy, but it's real. And in a world full of comfortable lies, reality is the most radical choice you can make. If this opened your eyes, if it made you uncomfortable in a way that felt true, then share it, like it, and subscribe. Not for entertainment, but because you're done with illusions and ready to see things as they are. If this transformed you even a little, help it reach someone else who's still trapped in the comfortable lies that once trapped you. The world doesn't need more men who know how to please women. It needs more men who know how to respect themselves. It doesn't need more men who can play the game better. It needs more men who refuse to play games at all. Nietzsche's warning wasn't meant to make you cynical about love. It was meant to make you conscious about it, to help you see the difference between authentic connection and unconscious manipulation, to show you that real love isn't something you fall into, it's something you rise toward. The woman who's meant for the authentic version of you won't be threatened by your strength. She won't try to diminish your power or control your choices. She won't need you to be less than you are so she can feel comfortable with who she is. She'll challenge you to grow, not demand that you shrink. She'll inspire you to excellence, not enable your mediocrity. She'll love you for who you are, not who you pretend to be for her approval. But first, you have to become the kind of man who can recognize her when she appears. And that requires the courage to stop being the kind of man who settles for less than authentic love. The revolution begins with you. The healing starts when you stop waiting to be saved. Your real life, the one you've been too afraid to live, is waiting for you on the other side of these comfortable illusions. Stop performing, start being, stop seeking, start choosing, stop needing, start loving. The woman who can handle that version of you, she's worth waiting for. But first, you have to become worth finding. This is Nietzsche's gift to you, the brutal truth that sets you free. Not from love, but from the lies about love that have kept you imprisoned in patterns of dependency and desperation. The choice is yours. The time is now. The only question that remains is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Will you use it to become more manipulative, or will you use it to become more authentic? Will you use it to win games, or will you use it to stop playing them? Will you use it to get better at being fake, or will it inspire you to finally be real? The answer to that question will determine not just the quality of your relationships, but the quality of your entire life. Choose wisely, choose consciously, choose with the full weight of what's at stake. Your freedom depends on it. Your happiness requires it. Your authentic self is waiting for you to claim it. The revolution starts now.